Tonight, the King 5 investigators show us how workers at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation are demanding change in the system that they say continues to make them sick from chemical vapors.
Since the end of June, a record 50 workers have been exposed to suspected chemical vapors. That's a record. And workers want the government to stop denying that there's a chronic problem at the site. King 5 investigator Susanna Frame reported on Hanford for the last 3 years. What do you have tonight, Susanna?
Well, Lori and Mark, first I want to show you a layout of the Hanford Reservation. It's just north of Richland, which is right here, and also right alongside the Columbia River. It's a huge reservation, and this is where the federal government produced plutonium for the country's nuclear weapons program for more than 40 years, all the way through the Cold War. Now, what is left behind is millions of gallons of nuclear waste, the worst of which is stored in huge, massive underground tanks, some of which are leaking. But the biggest problem for workers right now is that this waste can emit, and does emit, chemical vapors without warning, making these workers sick. Some of them are calling it right now a crisis over there. And in all my years of reporting at Hanford, I've never seen workers this frustrated, this angry, or this resolved to finally force a change. It sounds like you're saying that Hanford has ruined your life.
Hanford has ruined my life. Hanford has ruined my life, and they don't care.
Seth Ellingsworth's life started crumbling around him 9 months ago during a routine job at Hanford. He was working right outside what's known as the Sea Farm, where workers are transferring nuclear waste out of leaking tanks.
I've just been fighting, getting worse, getting better, getting worse, getting better, and to the point where I thought I was dying.
Seth's been monitoring radiation at the site for 12 years, but it took just a few minutes for his career, his health, his life to come to a standstill.
It got really strong, kind of overwhelming.
On August 31st of 2015, Seth began smelling something odd, suspected chemical vapors. He got out of there, but felt the effects immediately.
I started having breathing problems the same day.
And tests produced some scary results. High levels of toxic material in his blood and urine. Cesium, a radioactive isotope. Mercury, and thallium, a suspected human carcinogen. Ever since, Seth hasn't worked and hasn't taken a breath of air for granted. He needs nebulizer treatments at least 3 times a day to open up his lungs.
All this medicine I take every day.
And a pile of medications to make it through the day.
Every day I wake up and I can't breathe.
None of which he needed before that exposure last August.
If you want to know what it feels like, blow out all the air that you can, and then have a 200-pound man stand on your chest and not get off you.
The once active father, fitness buff, and snowboarder is a different person now.
I'm 35, and I act like somebody who's in their 80s or 90s. It's not right. I'm running out of hope, actually. I don't know if I'm going to get better. I don't know.
Here's where the vapor dangers begin at Hanford, underground, where 99% of tank waste consists of cancer-causing chemicals, including mercury, formaldehyde, octane, ammonia gas, and PCBs. And as the waste ages and decays, it creates chemical vapors that release into the air without any warning at all.
They continue to deny what is happening.
And talk about no warning. Seth Ellingsworth says the training he's received in 12 years on the job skips over the real dangers of chemical vapors, instead emphasizing that the company protects you from harmful levels of gases and vapors.
When you're told that all that matters is your safety, and that we're not exposing you to anything, and we're being safe, and your health is important, you believe them.
Management's toed this line for years, that vapor exposures never measure above acceptable levels, and that at Hanford, safety comes first. But here's what they're not telling the workforce. No mention of the 20-plus studies going back nearly 25 years. Scientific data, year after year, finding chemical vapors are not in check at Hanford. That they can cause cancer and other chronic diseases from even brief but intense exposures.
The management who expects us to continue working and denies that anyone gets sick, I blame them all. I want them all to be held accountable.
Here's what else the powers that be aren't mentioning. The long list of workers for decades who've been hospitalized, people sick, suffering, and even dying from exposures.
How many of you believe that you or your loved one got sick from working at Hanford?
I did.
I did.
No talk of victims such as those King 5 profiled in our 2014 series, The Human Toll of Hanford's Dirty Secrets. John Swain and Dale Gear both left with permanent brain damage. Diana Gegg suffering from dementia and vision loss. Lonnie Poteet, he's got debilitating nerve damage. Don Slaw, permanent lung damage. Scott Passage, lung disease and cancer. And Gary Saul, who died from chronic exposure to toxins at the site.
How can you continue to do this? How as a person can you do this to other people? It shouldn't happen to anybody, and it shouldn't happen to anybody else.
Seth Ellingsworth is furious management hasn't educated workers about any of these cases. He and many others believe the reason comes down to this: money trumps safety and humanity at Hanford.
Has anyone high up in the company called to say, how are you doing, Seth? What can we do to help you?
No, absolutely not. No.
Well, the managers weren't calling, they were collecting a great big bonus. The Department of Energy awarded its contractor in charge of the tanks, Washington River Protection Solutions, or WRPS, award fees of more than $13.7 million the same year Seth was exposed, receiving a very good rating for their safety program.
There's somebody making the decisions that our lives are not as important as theirs. So it doesn't matter if we get sick, our lives are not as important as other people's, because we're just the ones out in the farm doing the work. We're not the highly educated managers making the big pay, so we don't matter.
We sent the Department of Energy and WRPS a list of detailed questions this week for this report. They didn't answer any of the questions, but they did send a statement saying that they take worker safety seriously and that their monitoring shows vapor levels always measuring below occupational exposure limits, where workers, that means, translation, workers such as Seth Ellingsworth, should not be sick and should be safe.
Now, Seth is still an employee. Why is he speaking out this way now?
I consider him a real hero, a very brave person, because there is a long history of retaliation at Hanford for workers that speak out. But he says, you know what, I don't care. His health is more important to him and the health of his coworkers. So he says he wants to keep talking about it and keep fighting until there's finally a change out there.
And now to a King 5 investigation. Working at Hanford has made dozens of workers sick from suspected exposures to toxic chemical vapors. One union has taken a stand against the problem. King 5 investigator Susanna Frame joins us now. She's uncovered a backlash against the union for trying to keep its members safe. Susanna.
That's right, Lori and Amanda. Ever since requiring that all members of the Pipe Fitters Union wear extra safety gear, their workers are losing jobs to people willing to go without the safety upgrades. We've obtained a smoking gun document showing that the pipe fitters are being punished, not rewarded for being safe. But first, we meet a pipe fitter who didn't have the right protection working at Hanford.
I have muscle spasms.
This is the face of Hanford the government doesn't want you to see.
I guess it's the best way of saying it.
Jerry Furson, a pipe fitter who worked at the site for 27 years. He's a chemical vapor victim, so sick he's struggling to make it through this interview.
Yeah, I guess that's the way you would say it.
Jerry has acute nerve damage, asthma, cirrhosis of the liver, and more, all from exposure to poisonous vapors at Hanford. For many years, Jerry worked in Hanford's tank farms, where the most lethal substance on the planet is stored in massive underground tanks. Nuclear waste left behind from decades of producing plutonium for the country's nuclear weapons program. That's him in the upper right corner of this picture, working at the site. Once a fit, healthy man.
What do you think happened to Jerry?
I think the chemicals just absolutely ate everything up inside him.
The chemicals at Hanford?
Yeah.
After a rash of exposures in 2014, Jerry's union, the local 598 pipe fitters, drew a line in the sand. all members would wear full respiratory gear like this, with fresh air bottles on their backs at all times, the first and only union to ever do so. But the equipment is heavy. It costs government contractors money, and it slows down the work. The pipe fitters decided no exceptions. It's the only way to make sure you won't be exposed to a vapor.
It just came down to the safety of the workers.
Tim Still is Local 598's business manager.
Protecting your workers is our #1 job, and making sure they're safe and they go to work safe and they get a safe work environment and they go home to their families every day. That's our #1 job. That's what we do.
What has Hanford done to your lives?
Ruined him. Totally ruined him. I knew his life was in danger when he was in Vietnam. I didn't know his life was in danger when he was working at Hanford.
After Jerry's union decided protecting members from vapors was job #1, job 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and on down the line dried up. Remember, supplying and maintaining that gear costs money and slows down the work. Jobs historically awarded to pipe fitters suddenly wound up going to other trades. When this document surfaced, their suspicion turned to certainty. It's a request for proposal, or RFP, asking for bids on a lucrative contract in the tank farms.
Shocked that they would even put that in an RFP.
What was in there? Language saying everyone knows the 598 pipe fitters are donning respiratory protection and greatly reducing production rates, and that the contract award will be based on ability, costs, and deliverable timeframes. In other words, production rates.
The bid went out for work, and if you want to be safe, the safest, you're not going to get the job.
Pretty close. Pretty close. I would definitely say that. I mean, it's not hard to read that. There's not a lot of ambiguity in the statement.
The message was clear. Safety gets in the way of money at Hanford.
That if you use Local 598, your cost ain't gonna be within reason.
And you probably won't get the job.
Probably won't get the job. There is a battle out there against the safety on workers.
And the thing is that
Without that kind of protection, pipe fitter Jerry Furson took a massive hit of vapors in 2007. Tests showed arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury in his blood. Mercury can cause brain damage.
for several days and anyway they
What just happened, Jerry?
I have a bad shoulder.
In addition to a host of physical problems such as nerve damage affecting his shoulder, Jerry's been diagnosed with something even more devastating: chemical-induced dementia.
That's really
He deals with the pain of confusion and memory loss every day. In the interview, Jerry struggled to find words and tried to coax himself into remembering them.
when I got contaminated. Come on. Come on.
Jerry's wife, Linda, says this is the hardest part to deal with for her, their kids, and grandkids.
The fact that, Grandpa's gone. Basically, my grandson said to me the other day, really, we've lost him already. We just have the body here. And that's where I'm sorry.
Union leaders say it's because of devastating cases like Jerry Furson's that they're not giving up. They say keeping their workers safe is more important than getting the jobs. By the way, the pipe fitters did not get the job that was listed in that RFP. The government contractor in charge of the tank farms, in charge of that RFP, essentially, WRPS, said they couldn't comment for the story because of pending litigation.
Your heart breaks for Jerry. I don't even know what to say.
You know what's interesting about Jerry that I didn't have time to put in the story is that he's a minister as well. Oh, wow. So a huge part of his life was preaching at a church, I think in the Sunnyside area. And of course that's been taken away from him as well. And he is amazing, though. He kept saying that God was looking out for him and that he can't really be mad. He's just has accepted his situation. His wife, on the other hand, wasn't that forgiving, but he's a very spiritual, lovely person.
Well, what is the state doing about this? Here are workers who are obviously being hurt.
You know, the biggest thing that's happening right now is the lawsuit filed by the Attorney General, Bob Ferguson. It's unprecedented, one of its kind. It came after our 2014 series, The Human Toll of Hanford's Dirty Secrets, so we're happy about that outcome. But, you know, the legal process is just moving along. Basically, they're trying to force the Department of Energy to keep the workers safe.
Tonight, the King 5 investigators reveal what really happened at Hanford that led to a record number of workers getting sick from poisonous gases over the past 3 months. It got so bad, the state attorney general filed an emergency legal motion to have a federal judge force the feds to better protect workers. As King 5 investigator Susanna Frame reports in her ongoing investigation, records show top Hanford managers decided to dial down on safety during some of the most dangerous work and then look the other way after people started getting sick.
As the majestic Columbia River rolls through Washington state, it's here in the desert of central Washington that the beautiful Columbia has something ugly lurking underground. A lethal toxic legacy. 56 million gallons of liquid nuclear waste. Dangerous contaminated byproducts left behind by the government's race to build the world's first nuclear bomb. And according to one study after another, dating back 25 years, there's another legacy here. A legacy of denial. A refusal by the U.S. Department of Energy to admit that workers cleaning up the mess at Hanford face a serious health hazard, getting sick and disabled from vapors, chemical vapors that rise up out of underground tanks holding the aging waste. 2 years ago, the government's own top experts wrote, Hanford leaders need to wake up and take the issue seriously, writing, management must acknowledge the health risk associated with releases of tank vapors.
They refuse to acknowledge, in my view, the serious situation that they have.
State Attorney General Bob Ferguson.
I don't say it lightly when I say there's a culture of indifference to worker safety there, but what other conclusion can one reach? Their own experts tell them what to do, they refuse to do it, workers still get sick.
And this is one of them. 2 years ago, veteran worker Steve Ellingson got hit with vapors, and within days, he was on medication for constant coughing, burning lungs, and breathing difficulties.
It's just like I can't get a good deep breath. It's like a real shallow breath all the time. I don't know. I'm getting worried that this may be the way I am the rest of my life.
Fast forward 2 years, and the problem reaches record proportions. 60 workers seeking medical attention this spring and summer. So, what happened? Why did it get so bad? The problem started in March when the government contractor, WRPS, started pumping out nuclear waste from the leaky tank known as AY-102. And anytime you disturb volatile, hot waste, the danger from vapors increases dramatically. So WRPS geared up. All workers in the area provided with oxygen tanks, and they made a larger do not enter zone to keep people safe. It was working. Then, according to court documents just filed by the Attorney General, all that changed. The AG wrote, on April 13th, a month into the project, WRPS COO Rob Gregory made a big announcement. New data justified eliminating full respiratory protections in most areas. In other words, good news. The science shows the operation is safe.
Am I angry about it? You bet.
Ferguson says that decision was based on data the contractor knew, or definitely should have known, wasn't good.
They provide misinformation repeatedly. And those aren't my words. A federal judge a year ago blasted the federal government for a lack of transparency around Hanford. So it's just more of the same, frankly.
This is what he means. In deciding to downgrade safety, WRPS used the same science their experts find is flawed. A 2014 Blue Ribbon panel wrote, their data gathering program is incapable of detecting and quantifying the dangers of vapor exposures.
So using what the pros say is bad science, managers slacked off on safety. And what happened? Within 2 weeks, people started getting sick repeatedly. 40 workers exposed to vapors in just a 5-day period of time.
I'm looking for emergency. I didn't get checked in.
And who got hit in the crossfire? That's right, Steve Ellingson. He ended up so sick, he headed to Harborview after getting hit from vapors again. It happened shortly after WRPS cut back on those safety measures. 2 years after that first exposure, Ellingson was starting to get better. He was back at work. Then this.
Right now my lungs hurt all the time.
All the time.
All the time. Never goes away.
We wanted to interview the WRPS top boss, President Mark Lindholm, about the decisions that led to workers like Steve Ellingson struggling to breathe again. We were turned down. So we caught up with him at a company picnic in Richland.
Hi, Mr. Lindholm. I'm Susanna Frame from King TV in Seattle. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. We're here to talk to you about the vapor problem going on at the site. Why didn't the company do anything at all, to upgrade the protections after the first people got sick in April and beginning of May?
There will be an opportunity when I can speak, but right now I can't speak. So thank you very much, and I appreciate you driving all the way over.
Lindholm wouldn't answer specific questions, but took the opportunity to put out a message.
Is there anything at all that you'd like to say to the workforce or the public that's quite concerned now?
Absolutely. WRPS is committed to protecting the health and safety of its employees. Thank you very much.
So why did you downgrade when you were doing the AWOW 102 retrieval? Why did you do that?
Take one tablet by mouth twice a day.
Back at Steve Ellingson's house, he's taking more medication to breathe.
So right now I'm using that every 4 hours.
And not able to complete a full day's work. He's exhausted and outraged the company is making decisions on suspect data instead of what's happening to human beings.
It's upsetting. You know, it makes you angry that they are using you as a piece of cordwood, really. I mean, you're just a number, a rock, a brick. You're just a piece that they use until you're no good to them anymore.
We asked the U.S. Department of Energy, which has the ultimate responsibility at Hanford, for an interview for this story. They wouldn't agree to one, but they sent us a statement saying safety of the workforce is a top priority and that they've spent $50 million in the last year to address vapor concerns at Hanford. They also reiterated that based on their data, again, they're talking about the data, that the Department of Energy believes workers are safe on the job. And again, what the workers are saying is they keep going to the data, which has been widely criticized, instead of looking at empirical data, you know, real human beings, and kind of gauging their decision-making on that.
Now at 6:30, sick Hanford workers take their case before a federal judge in Spokane. It's a first-of-its-kind event in state history. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Wright.
And I'm Amanda Grace, in for Lori Matsukawa. After more than 50 workers got sick from toxic chemical vapors at Hanford, Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson filed an emergency legal action. He wants a judge to intervene and force the federal government to protect workers.
King 5 investigator Susanna Frame, whose report sparked the legal proceedings, attended the hearing in Spokane, joins us live now from the federal courthouse. Susanna, good evening.
Hi to you. The judge heard a lot today, and it was almost as if it was coming from two different universes. On one side, you have the state of Washington saying thousands of Hanford workers have gotten sick and even died from exposure to toxic chemicals. On the other side, you have the federal government, which owns Hanford, saying there's no proof anyone's ever gotten sick from vapors. At one point, the judge seemed a little exasperated and said, "This isn't making sense. Who's telling me the full story?"
For 25 years, study after study has shown workers at Hanford are getting sick from an invisible danger, toxic chemical vapors that vent into the air from underground nuclear storage tanks. And for those same 25 years, the U.S. Department of Energy has denied there's a problem. Today, inside this federal courthouse where cameras are not allowed, a judge heard arguments that could finally stop this cycle. It was a big day for sick Hanford workers who made the trip to Spokane. People with permanent brain damage, nerve damage, and lung disease.
Well, it's great that it finally has happened. I hope he makes the right decision and makes sure that the people stay safe out there.
But people haven't been safe. Traditionally, Hanford has not made respiratory protection, what they called using supplied air, mandatory. So there's no protection when vapors hit the air. The advocacy group Hanford Challenge reviewed 3 years' worth of recorded exposures at the site from 2014 to July of this year. In that time, 206 people allegedly exposed to toxins. Leading up to this hearing, supplied air was made mandatory temporarily in August. How many exposures recorded since then? 0. 0 people hit with vapors since August.
It'd be stupid to ignore the fact that there's data that shows the exposures go away when there's supplied air.
But inside the courtroom, lawyers for the federal government argued that data is flawed. They told the judge there's no proof that vapors make people sick. They said symptoms people have like nosebleeds, dizziness, a metallic taste in the mouth, and headaches could be from other things like the common cold, stress, dry air, and gum disease.
It made me just so angry that they're telling me that I'm not sick and that this is just a coincidence, that if anything but where I worked caused it.
Anybody that says that you don't get sick from those vapors really has a serious problem. You know, they're lying. I mean, there's no way anybody, a kindergartner, could tell you that that's a problem.
Tonight, the King 5 investigators exposed that once Hanford workers get sick from toxic vapors, they're typically victimized again.
The process to get medications and treatments paid for by the government is so cumbersome, many workers are having to pay out of pocket. In her continuing investigation, King 5 investigator Susanna Frame shows us how those payments can lead to financial ruin.
The voice that came over says, "This is not a drill. This is not a drill. Take cover immediately."
For Lonnie Poteet Killinghawk, that warning came too late.
I'm angry and I'm upset about it. They destroyed my life.
9 years ago, he was driving his fueling truck into what's called a tank farm at Hanford. That's where massive carbon steel underground tanks store the legacy left behind by the secret Manhattan Project. Hot, radioactive nuclear waste, the most dangerous substance known to man.
Almost instantly, I started to get burned on my arm and on my face.
Unbeknownst to Killinghawk when he showed up for work, the hose on the left side of this photo had ruptured, spilling nuclear waste all over the ground.
They call it a spill, but that stuff went everywhere. It was up on platforms, it was everywhere.
But here's the thing, that spill happened 11 hours before his shift to fuel up generators at the farm. Lots of people knew about the catastrophe, but no one warned him. So for more than a half hour, Killinghawk went about his job breathing in toxic chemical vapors from the spill.
They knew there was a problem, they chose not to do anything.
The result? Lonnie has trigeminal neuralgia, a degenerative disease that shoots electric-like bolts of pain through your face. It's considered one of the most painful conditions a person can endure. During this interview, Lonnie repeatedly winced in pain.
Oh, man.
He can barely go outside, can't work, or enjoy his hobbies because it's so intolerable.
It's difficult. He's very strong and self-willed, and this is devastating to him. But we're in it together.
As if being sick weren't enough to handle, right from the beginning, it was an all-out fight with the U.S. Department of Energy to get help. A health effects report by the feds found no evidence of an adverse impact to human health from the spill, that the workers could be affected by herbicide spraying, smoke from wildfires, or pollen allergies.
I went and paid for my own testing to prove I've never been allergic to nothing, and I still am not allergic.
That's not all he paid for. There were expensive medications while fighting the Department of Energy and its contractor to pay the bills.
$400 is what the triliptol costs. These are the bills.
Even after some of his claims were approved,
this is one of the ones that has to get paid pretty soon or the pickup's gone.
The bills piled up.
In fact, it was turned into collection, so they're adding up.
This is the pattern at Hanford. For years, studies have shown the first response from the Department of Energy is to deny there's a problem and then deny help to take care of it.
I had a nice savings started in 2 different banks, and they're gone.
Wiped out.
Wiped out. They're gone.
A few months ago, more bad news. The home they've lived in for 8 years, the place where 9 grandchildren love to play in the big backyard.
I love this house. This was supposed to be my retirement place.
Their retirement place is about to belong to the bank.
We come home one day and there's the posting on your door said they've started the foreclosure process. You're letting go of memories, and it's not easy to let go of memories.
A decade after his exposure, Killinghawk's lost his health, his financial security, and his home. But he won't give up fighting for Hanford workers still on the job, like the nearly 60 people exposed to suspected vapors just in the last 3 months.
That's crap. It's just really, really wrong, because they're going to suffer just like I suffered, just like others before me suffered that I didn't know until you shared that with me. And it's horrific that that goes on to this very day.